Oh, David's not ready.
Recording in progress.
Now we're ready. Thank you, David. This is our last session for the 34th Southeast Recycling Conference. So this particular session is just a general session. We've got, I believe, 2 presentations. This session is going to be moderated by Heather Armstrong, who's the Executive Director for Recycle Florida Today, and someone that I have known for, I don't want to say how many years, 15 years at least. Heather and I work together at the Southern Waste Information Exchange, and I can tell you this woman puts her heart and soul in the subject matter, and it's a great honor to have her up on the stage with me. So, Ms. Heather, please take the last session.
Hello. Thank you, Jean, and especially thank you to all of you who joined us for this last session, as well as our speakers here. They have some phenomenal information prepared, and you are really in store for a treat. As Jean shared, I'm Heather Armstrong, Executive Director of Recycle Florida Today, and we are Florida's state recycling organization. If you're not familiar with us, please take a moment to visit us online and learn more about what we do. But without further ado, we don't want to take up any of the time today. I'd like to just take a moment to introduce Miss Jessica Shrout. She's president of Circle 3 Branding, and she's here to share Lifting the Veil, Marketing to Change Recycling Behavior. Please join me in welcoming Jessica.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be here today. So, you guys might not be marketers yourselves for your organization. I deal with a lot of operations people and executives. So while you may not be directly responsible for the marketing that goes out from your organization, I think it's important for you to learn what can go into that and how you can be an ally and an advocate for the marketing that goes out from your company. So I run a marketing agency specifically for the waste and recycling industry. Sometimes I'm working with haulers that are working with residential companies. Sometimes I'm working for holding companies that are responsible for several types of waste and recycling organizations and people who supply to the waste and recycling industry. So I deal with a variety of people on a daily basis. And what I found was that very few marketers have what it takes to work with the waste and recycling industry because it's kind of a specific thing, and you have to be pretty passionate to want to work in this line of business. So as I've been working with this industry, I've noticed that we have a lot of communication issues, and that leads to recycling behaviors or misbehaviors that I think could be resolved if we all get a little more committed to putting out some quality messaging. So if you're not directly responsible for your organization's marketing, you can in turn be an advocate for what they're doing, take what you learned here and bring it home, tell them what we've talked about today, ask how you can support their work, and always be on the lookout for opportunities to provide content for your marketers. And that means photos, stories, things that you learned, tips and tricks, and work with that person to provide that content to them. So today we're going to talk about how we can keep the public interested in recycling, the generational differences in the way that we communicate, and the principles of effective communication in order to enhance what you're already doing. Because probably when you leave here today, you're going to be like, well, that was common sense. And that's my point. But there are people who work with me daily on these things that we all feel like are common sense. So I'm going to remind you of those things today. That way you can kind of pull it to the forefront of your thinking and develop a better communication plan to work with whoever you consider your customers to be. And that can be municipalities that you're working with, it can be other companies within the waste and recycling industry, or our frontline users like homeowners and residents. So first I want to make sure this is working for me. Whoops. There we go. The first thing that you want to do when we're talking about effective communication is really know your audience. And the thing that I run into time and time again is that people say, well, my audience is everybody, because everybody throws away trash and everybody tries to recycle. And I say, yeah, but let's take it a step further. Because when you know your audience, like truly know who they are, what they look like, their education level, their income level, you start to understand where they're hanging out. And by that, I mean what platforms they're on and what media they're consuming. So if you say your audience is everyone, that's going to lead to a really diluted, anemic, pale sort of marketing that just goes kind of by the wayside when you're out there competing for your customers' attention amongst so many things that are, frankly, sometimes more interesting than what we have to say. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you own a shoe store. And so I would ask you, who's your audience? Who are you marketing to? And you might be like, well, Jessica, everybody. Pretty much everyone wears shoes with few exceptions. But then what if you had some customers come into your shoe store one day and one was a future Olympic athlete and the other was an elderly person who had some arthritis in their knees and hips? Wouldn't you be selling them two very different products? Both of these sets of shoes might offer support and enhanced performance, but the words you use, the photos of your product, the emotions that you put behind it are completely separate between, say, some heavy orthopedic shoes versus athletic training shoes. That's the same for your customers. So the words that you use in the waste and recycling industry to talk to the different types of people within your audience make a difference. Sound exhausting? That's why I stay in business. So to get to the point quickly for you guys, you need to be asking yourself, who's the decision maker within the household? Or if you're doing a municipal bid, who's the decision maker there? And what are the things that matter to them? So get to know them really, really well. I'm talking age, gender identity, income, education level, any sort of social distinguishers that help you know them really well. That way you can create the perfect message targeted directly to them on the platform that they're most comfortable using. So we're going to take a look at generations in the United States. So we have here, if you can't read it, the first one is the greatest generation, then the silent generation, the baby boomers, Gen X, then millennials being the largest bar there, followed by Gen Z, which surprised me. I did not really know that millennials are so populous right now. Is this the breakdown that you expected? So when you're doing your marketing, you need to analyze this in terms of where is the money coming from right now for you? Who is your most valuable segment of this audience? And that's who you need to be marketing to, because what you're dealing with is you guys have a lot to do. You have a lot of different messages to get out there about what you're doing for society and the environment and whatever else your goals are, and you can't be perfect on every platform at once. So just like you make every other business decision, you have to make some choices, and you have to put the biggest bang for your buck where the largest return on investment is going to come from, or else you're going to spread yourself far too thin. So in terms of, let's say, residential recycling, you need to make the answers clearer, like who within the household makes the decision on what service they're going to use, or who within the business is going to make the decision about collaborating with you. Then, I would say if you have the time and the money to focus on a second segment, look at the next most populous and raise them right. You have the opportunity to get in front of them before they are decision makers and sway them towards your line of thinking. Next, I was asked a couple of months ago about platforms like television and radio and newsprint. Because we hear a lot about digital marketing, and somebody said, you know, is this still relevant? Should I still be doing newspaper ads? The answer is, if that's where your audience is, then yes. I can't really answer that for you, and you know, I have a little bit of bias from my generation that I like to choose platforms that are the most trackable, that I can show from the first impression to the purchase of your services that we've watched this customer the entire time, and I can almost guarantee that it's this ad that convinced them to consider your services. However, if you guys find that radio is where people are hearing the most about you, and I'm just kind of using that as like a larger example, I'm pretty sure that's not the answer, but just in case it was, you should feel confident putting your money there if that's where you know people are listening and making their choices. So the answer really depends, and it depends on you and who you're working with. So let's get into messaging a little bit. I chose this image of somebody visiting a doctor here because a lot of the marketing that we get about recycling tends to come with a negative twist to it. Don't do this. Only do this. Minimize your impact. Recycle more. And when I see those things, I get the same feeling that I think a lot of people get when they're going to their annual physical of like, oh my gosh, this day is just gonna be awful. I'm gonna get in there, my doctor's gonna tell me that my cholesterol's too high, my weight is up when it should be down, I'm not doing enough. And sure enough, you get in there and the doctor says, you should work out more, you should watch what you eat, do this, don't do that. And then you kind of are like, okay, thank goodness that's over. Hopefully this next year goes really, really slow and I don't have to see them again unless I get sick. And that sort of negative spin is what leads people to consider other sources for when they're looking for healthcare information. We basically lose trust in people because all we get from them are negative opinions. And so it goes with the waste and recycling industry. So we get a lot of these challenges because of the negative emotions that are put on things that kind of instantly turns people off, and the overall feeling that the waste and recycling industry is a little misunderstood. And you might feel this misunderstanding when you feel like you've been repeating messages over and over again year after year, and nobody seems to be sinking into what you're saying because it's like, why? I put out this messaging on plastics and why we only accept numbers 1 and 2. Why do I have to keep repeating this? Why don't they go to the website and look at what we accept or not? Problem is, there's a lot of terminology surrounding the waste and recycling world, and we tend to lean on that instead of simplifying the messaging. And these are some industry terms from the theatrical industry, just to kind of prove a point that we've all got industry terms. So I grew up doing theater, and these all mean different things. Like the word truck means something different to me than it means to you guys. So we've all got this complex language, and we kind of tend to hide behind it in the waste industry too, where we get a little overly complicated. And you add this complex language into our penchant for telling people what they're doing wrong or what they should be doing better, and that's when people start to look outside of the waste industry for assistance. And so then the haulers and recycling companies that understand this do a complete 180. They decide, okay, well, we need to avoid complexity, so maybe let's not say much. Let's just rest with what's on our website and not do outreach programs because it's safer that way, people won't misunderstand what we're doing. And then the risk becomes, if you're not speaking about it, somebody else probably is. And these are untrained resources within the community, and let's go with bloggers who are interested in the environment and sustainability, who maybe don't have waste industry experience. So they're talking about what they think they know, but what may not be the case for people who are actually living and working in this space. I'm going to show you one trusted source that had the opportunity to do well, but messed it up. Do you guys recognize who this is? Yeah? You guys seen Trevor Noah before from The Daily Show? Okay, so I was really excited. He did like a 10-minute segment on recycling, and I was like, yes, this is awesome. He's finally gonna help us understand and do it on a mass platform so we can educate more people on what's going on and why we need more dedication to recycling and what the average person can do to help us. And it was pretty good. It was not bad. But then he ended the segment by talking about how if you recycled your water bottle with the little ring on and left the cap on, that your water bottle was being thrown away. and there was a risk of all the things in your single stream cart being thrown away along with it, which left the audience confused and really suspicious about what their recycling programs were doing. Or, well, why does the word on the water bottle, why does the message on the water bottle say one thing and Trevor Noah is saying a different thing? Or why is my hauler saying this and it's not making sense to me? And these were just 3 of like thousands of comments that I found of people saying, gosh, now I know why recycling doesn't make sense. And the key here is that somebody with all the resources in the world, I mean, you think about the money that goes into producing that show. He could have called anyone in this room and gotten better advice than he did at that time. So viewers felt like they were getting the real inside scoop, and it may not have been a helpful thing for the industry or for, let's call them civilians, to learn from that segment. So if you're not talking about it, someone else is, and chances are they're not giving us the best advice. So the solution for this is more communication from you. And I've built this little acronym for you, and this is kind of your takeaway for the day, that we talk louder than those so-called trusted sources. We become the trusted source within our community, and we do that through more communication. So the first thing to communicating more is making it meaningful. Instead of saying, do this or don't do that, pose the problem to your audience. And by that, I mean give them a little context around what they're saying and how their actions, whether that's positive or negative, impact the situation. So for a lot of people, they don't see the relationship beyond the curb. So they don't understand what goes into this and why you don't have the people and the machinery to do whatever it is they think that you do. So show them how complex it is, but again, make it simple and relatable. So this means getting authentic, showing them behind the scenes, lifting the veil on your operations, and getting a little down and dirty with them. So I'm talking not beautifully produced videos, but simple cell phone videos of what's going on. They can be seconds long, just a little something that helps them understand what it is that you do. Then I want you to do it often. So we need several opportunities to get the message before we're ready to act on something. And by this I mean, has anybody ever seen a billboard for McDonald's along the highway? Yeah, we know McDonald's exists and we know what they sell, but they keep reminding us of that in order to trigger this response of, oh yeah, I am really thirsty. Now that I see that beautiful image of like a Coke with the condensation running off of it and the perfect ice cubes, yeah, you're right, I did need a drink. And I pull off and do a pit stop there. So they really understand that we need to see something a number of times before we are triggered to respond. So spend weeks or even seasons talking about the problems that are important to your organization. Next, good marketers make it relevant to us. So by that I mean, as a person who throws away trash and recycles, I don't care about your expenses or your time. I care about my environmental impact and how it affects my wallet at the end of the day. So you need to show how small changes in behavior are going to impact me. Does it mean that wish cycling increases the costs of what I pay for somebody to come pick up my recycling? Tell me that. There's a great example with the Goodwill organization. One of the locations in New England had this problem where people were so afraid to throw things away and they understood that they couldn't really recycle, so the solution was, let me just donate all of this junk to Goodwill, and Goodwill will sort it out. And they will, if they don't like it, if it's not gonna work, they'll throw it away, but surely someone will find value in this. And it turns out they didn't. One location was saddled with like $1 million waste hauling fee because of the amount of junk that people had donated. So the bottom line was that there are going to be some changes. Will they raise their prices? Will they have to close a location or lay off some employees? I don't really know what the answer is to that, but there will be some sort of ripple effect from that. And people need to understand that by trying to prevent their trash from going to the landfill, they saddled Goodwill with the burden of having to sort through it. So make it relevant. Show the cause and effect. And last, you want to do it early. So get ahead of issues. This really shows that you know your audience and you understand what their problems are going to be and you can anticipate them. And this example is something that triggers every residential hauler that I work with of Christmas schedules. Every year, like December 1st, there is a meltdown on social media and their customer service reps get inundated with calls saying, what's the schedule going to be like? When do I put out my trash? I usually do it on Tuesdays. Does it mean it's going to be on Thursdays, or should I put it out early, or is there going to be no trash service? And they spend so many man-hours working on sorting that out that if they could start talking about it earlier and make sure that it's going out on email blasts and newsletters and automated calls and social media and the radio, if that's where they find their customers, it could save them some time. So anticipate problems, know what's going to be on your customer's mind, and start talking about it really early. So the best thing that you can do today is, as you're traveling home, think about what your challenges are, where the drains on your time and money are, and start identifying them. They're the things that you're tired of hearing about. They're the questions that you answer every time you have a family get-together and somebody without experience in the waste industry says, hey, how do I recycle my television? What do I do? How do I do this? Where does this go? So make that list. And then I want you to inventory your assets. So once you know your audience segments and you know the most valuable one and you know the problems that you're stuck dealing with over and over again, inventory what platforms you're on, where you should be, and where you have help. And then you need to communicate early and often, make it relevant, repeat it until you're sick of it, and remember to communicate more. And if you guys want to communicate more with me, you can take a photo of my contact information there. My virtual door is always open, so if you have a question, you want to connect on LinkedIn and say, you know, how do I start a TikTok platform? Simple things like that. I'm very happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for lifting the veil of marketing to change recycling behavior. We are going to hold all of the questions until the end of the session to make sure that both of our speakers have an opportunity to share the content that they've provided today. Let's do a quick interactive exercise. Jessica gave us a lot of information about knowing our audience. So by show of hands, she talked about platforms. How many of you utilize a cell phone? By show of hands. Okay, so she talked about data, about knowing your market. How many of you utilize the iPhone? Oh my goodness, no, I'm just kidding. How many of you have a Droid? Where are all the hands at? No, I'm just kidding. All of us on the stage, everyone out there is an iPhone. So we have some virtual attendees. Virtual attendees, if you utilize an Android or an iPhone, please participate with us as well as if you have questions from any of our speakers as they are sharing, feel free to list those in the comment section of Zoom. Next, we are going to hear from Meredith Leahy. She is the Circular Economy Senior Manager for Rubicon. She's going to talk about the challenges in recycling are beyond just materials. Please join me in welcoming Meredith.
Thank you so much. All right, got my presentation up there. Hello and good morning to everyone. It's great to be here today with you in person, as well as those of you joining us virtually. As she mentioned, my name is Meredith Leahy. I'm a Circular Economy Senior Manager for Rubicon. And I'm here today to give you a little bit of insight into the different challenges that we face in recycling beyond just the materials that we receive from our customers. So if you're not familiar with Rubicon, we are a software company, and our core mission is to end waste. As part of our services, we support over 50 cities worldwide to implement technology that makes municipal fleets more efficient and gathers data for waste and recycling collection. We also operate in the commercial sector, and we provide waste and recycling management services for all sorts of different companies, from small, medium businesses all the way up to big Fortune 500 companies all across the US and beyond. So we work with companies to really better understand what materials and volumes they're generating, figure out how their programs could run more efficiently and more cost effectively. We try to find solutions for diversion opportunities for the materials that they may have in their waste streams. And we help to quantify the volumes that they're generating and managing so that they can achieve their sustainability, recycling, or waste reduction goals that they may have in place. For my specific role at Rubicon, I'm on the circular economy solutions team, and so we are focused solely on the harder to recycle materials for our customers and the materials that they're generating, and they need solutions for a lot of those materials to keep that material out of the landfill. So this is from the 2018 EPA Facts and Figures report that came out a few years ago. That's the latest one. But basically that chart there is showing what is the opportunity for the municipal solid waste and the materials that are going to that waste stream. So back in 2018, the recycling rate was around 32% for recycling and composting rate, and that was down from 35% roughly in 2017. So basically, when customers come to us with a lot of their waste, we look at it as an opportunity. So that's kind of how we continually have to look at it on all the different material streams that are currently maybe going to the landfill, but where is the opportunity that we can find and locate for our customers so that we can keep more of that material out of the landfill. So everybody is dealing with a larger and wider variety of materials in the marketplace these days, from the traditional materials like cardboard, aluminum cans, plastic bottles, shrink wrap, film bales. Those are kind of the more traditional ones that have a developed pathway for recycling. They've been around a number of years, even decades. Those have been sophisticated systems to capture that material, send it to an outlet that knows how to recycle them, and can handle those materials effectively. You compare that with the harder to recycle materials that are kind of newer, or they're not as common. So on the bottom row there, you see mattresses, foam coolers, car bumpers, vinyl floor mats. All of those we've gotten requests for recycling solutions from our customers. So when you get those, they're just not as common. And so there might be areas of the country where there are opportunities to recycle them, but a lot of areas there are not as developed opportunities. So whenever you have new materials, you have to kind of start developing that. Where are the opportunities, where are the outlets and vendors that can take this material? So it's not as tried and true yet as the top line there of those kind of materials. So you really have to spend a lot of time digging deep and finding where those viable options are for keeping this material out of the landfill. So COVID has hit everybody in different ways, including in the recycling industry. One thing that we've noticed with our customers is they're coming to us with different materials that we're having to find solutions for. So during COVID, probably everybody has seen the acrylic plastic sneeze guards. Those are those dividers that you see in between paying a cashier and you yourself paying for something, say in a grocery line. So there's those dividers to help hopefully keep the virus at bay. But now our customers are saying, hey, we don't need this anymore. How can we recycle it? How can we divert it? So we're having to come up with new innovative ways to deal with this kind of material that's hard to recycle, harder to recycle plastic, and then it's combined usually with some sort of metal. So whenever you have those two, it's often challenging trying to find diversion opportunities for that kind of item. We do have a kind of a mail-back program that we have developed for a big retail customer where they will put these acrylic sneeze guards into a box and then ship them directly back to a recycler who can process them and recycle them back into a future feedstock for different items. Another item is portable signposts. So everybody's probably seen these waiting in their car for those groceries or takeout items. so that places can move around the signpost. And now customers are coming to us saying, we don't need this anymore, what can we do with it? So we have tried to identify reuse or donation options to extend the life of these products. Everybody has seen personal protective equipment increase over the COVID pandemic. The mask and the gloves, customers are coming to us saying, what can we do with this material? For now, it's more of a waste to energy option, just given the variability of the types of PPE that are coming in. Maybe that'll change on down the line, but we are still trying to look for good options to keep that material out of the landfill since it's been so prolific during the COVID pandemic. So whenever we get recycling opportunities that are very unique materials or those really hard to recycle materials, we have to really do a lot of investigative work to figure out what those materials actually are. And by that I mean we have to figure out what is the actual composition of those materials. We have to often get a material data sheet or a safety data sheet to know what's in, something like an acrylic sneeze guard. Are there any additives? Are there different things that have been added to it? Because that will help determine what kind of recycling options there might be on down the line. So different components factor into that, such as the condition of the material. Is it dry? Is it wet? Has there been product in it? Can it be cleaned out? Some of the different components of knowing what the condition of the material can really have an impact on if it can be recycled or not. Also the volume, if there's a consistent, steady volume of this material that a vendor can kind of rely on, then there's oftentimes more opportunity to develop kind of a pathway for that kind of material. If it's lower volume and it's only one time and it's a unique kind of material composition, that can be a little more challenging to find recycling options for. And then proximity to recyclers. So we all know if it's longer distance to transport an item, then that just adds on to the cost and it can be more difficult to get that material to the end recycler. So once we've figured out what the material is and the condition and all those other factors, we kind of look at our toolbox of options to select the best path forward for those materials. So it might be reuse, like I mentioned, or donation. Here recently, I had about 12 pallets worth of hand sanitizer that a company just didn't have the use for anymore. They had so much of it. So I was able to find a medical nonprofit that was able to take it and distribute it to different shelters in an area in Washington State. So just trying to be aware of where potential outlets are to utilize those extra materials that might be available. If recycling, pure recycling is an option, we might have to look into consolidation at one central hub or backhauling to a distribution center for a certain customer group might be possible, or it might be an individual store pickup and kind of arranging the logistics for that, or a mail-back option. So say you had like a rural type location, they have perfectly good recyclable material, but nowhere nearby. Maybe it's a low volume and you can actually ship it or mail it back to a recycler directly to get that material recycled. Alternative options might include waste to energy or chemical recycling for materials that don't really have an avenue in mechanical recycling currently. So whenever we present options to our customers, we have to educate them on how to prepare these harder to recycle materials. So that might mean they have to prepare it in a pallet, in a bale, or some other type of way so that that material can be efficiently transported to a recycler, or it might need to be source separated. So like those acrylic sneeze guards, maybe they have to be the ones that separate the plastic from the metal, or maybe they want to send it off for a company to separate it out on down the line. We always want to try to prevent contamination. So just keeping certain contaminants out of a certain material stream is always key. That's a pretty common theme in recycling overall. And we also try to educate our customers on the equation of recycling. And by that, I mean there might be an intrinsic value in something to be recycled, depending on what it is, but maybe the labor and transportation costs are high, and that kind of overshadows how maybe a rebate value is on a certain type of material. So you have to kind of factor all that in for a customer to really consider the bigger picture and know what their best options are for recycling. So location is a key factor in recycling. As I mentioned, this image is from a 2016 study from the Southeast Recycling Development Council, so a few years old, but basically it's showing that there are over 360 key manufacturers in the Southeast that can use recycled content to make new products. So we do have a lot of options here in the Southeast, and you'll see all the different commodities there on the lower right side with all the different colors. But again, if you're far away from one of those points, it might be difficult to move that material a long distance. So at Rubicon, we work with a large variety of haulers and vendors all across the country to tap into potential diversion opportunities for different materials. Rubicon is asset light, and by that I mean we don't own any trucks, processing equipment, or landfills or any kind of places that are kind of brick and mortar type places. So we have to utilize vendors, haulers, recyclers in the marketplace to provide these options for customers. Hopefully these options are either locally, regionally, or maybe even national. So we really have to stay in good contact with our vendor base to know what the current options are. They might have changed since the last time we contacted them. Things are always changing in this industry, so we try to just maintain a good, consistent communication schedule with our vendors so that we do know what opportunities are current and how we can apply those to the customer materials that we're receiving. And we also have to be creative in connecting customer materials and finding those outlets for them, because sometimes, like I said, there might be a recycling option, but maybe labor is a hurdle or the transportation piece is a hurdle, and that's when we kind of call upon different vendors that we have to connect those dots to see how we can make all of that happen so that that material is kept out of the landfill. So earlier, it was mentioned there's a lot of negative news about recycling in the mainstream news or just in general. That tends to confuse people and maybe not make them want to recycle. So sometimes in the mainstream news, they're going for these effects to kind of get a reaction out of people. But sometimes they miss the bigger picture about what's happening with recycling. And as that relates to Rubicon, we get questions when these kind of articles are published in these different publications. So customers come to us like, hey, what's going on with recycling? We're hearing that it's the end of recycling. Is that true? And there are a lot of challenges, as we all know, with recycling, but there are a lot of improvements and different things that are happening to make the industry better. So if you take a closer look in the industry news, you'll notice some different capabilities that are being added on. Polypropylene, there's some investments going on so that material can be better sorted at the MRFs. There's different kinds of recycling mills that are being added onto, or new mills that are being announced. This one in particular, for a paper mill in Kentucky, it'll come online in 2023. So there are movements happening, but it does take time to do. So it's not just a snap of the fingers and something will change automatically, but the industry is reacting. With brand owners, they are requiring more recycled content in their products, so that is helping to spur PET recyclers expanding their operations, which is also a good sign. So there are these nuggets of improvements, so we just need to remember those when all those negative news stories come around and we think it's the end of recycling. I have a couple of examples from our customers. Chipotle is a customer of ours. They serve about 1 million customers per day in their overall network. As you might imagine, they go through a lot of single-use gloves that's necessary for their business. So that's about 9% of their total waste stream, along with plastic wrap. So we were able to find a solution for them to convert their polyethylene gloves that they use a lot in the food lines and their kitchens, and to make that back into a high-quality resin that's used in garbage can liners. So just trying to think outside the box and where can this material be used to prolong the life of that material type. Another example is Best Buy. They're another customer of ours. So sometimes in recycling, helping them with recycling comes in the form of optimizing their programs or making those program improvements for better efficiency. So we've been helping them with some of their waste compactors to make sure they're being hauled full instead of half full or less than full. As you might imagine, that's not very cost effective. So we've been helping them with that on the trash compactor side. And then as far as education, we've been helping them at their distribution centers to help educate their staff members on spotting contamination and pulling that out of cardboard bales or the shrink wrap bales or different things like that, so that those materials can actually be recycled and the loads won't be rejected, which nobody wants on either end. So just trying to kind of connect all the dots there. We also helped Best Buy install about 100 new balers to capture more of their cardboard material that would have gone to the landfill. So we're just trying to support them in all their different avenues to boost diversion rates and kind of create those process improvements for them across their network. Another piece that we offer and that's important in recycling is data. So you can't really track what you're doing if you haven't gathered the data for it. So we have a technology platform that can cater to different types of customers, businesses with one single location all the way up to many locations all across the country. We also have city-specific technology to help guide municipal fleets as they're picking up trash and recycling from citizens. And then we also have a hauler technology to help them in their operation and improve route optimization and different features that help their business. Our platform really shows all the data in one place. So one benefit that we bring to a lot of customers is they're dealing with a lot of material streams, there's a lot of vendors. Well, we can manage all of those vendors and bring the data all into one place, which doesn't seem like a lot in some regards, but if you're dealing with all these different types of vendors and all these data streams, then having it in one place is really convenient, and it really helps you gain familiarity with your program and your data and to really acknowledge where your program is currently and where it can go into the future. And it also helps you to analyze your data. So what are the program costs of your program currently? What are the sustainability metrics that are currently happening? What are the different material types, recycling versus waste? And how are your different locations comparing to each other? You can also place service requests within this platform, and you can also track sustainability reporting if a company is striving towards specific sustainability goals. As I mentioned, we have smart city technology. Our technology can be in the form in a tablet or a smartphone, and also a pod that fits into a diagnostic outlet into trucks. And so they're able to capture route information, other details that helps to improve the city fleets and their kind of the program efficiencies. They're able to figure out if there's problems with certain carts in certain parts of cities, what kind of contamination there might be for curbside programs. They're also able to figure out from a maintenance perspective if there's certain trucks that are running slower versus trucks in the fleet that are running faster. Just all these different pieces that can help them improve their overall program and make better services for their citizens. And then lastly, I am on the Tennessee Recycling Coalition board for a number of years, and we have our conference coming up at the end of August 25th through the 27th in Gatlinburg. If you're a NASCAR fan, Rusty Wallace will be speaking as the keynote speaker. So we'd love to see you there if you would like to attend. If you want more information, you can visit TennesseeRecyclingCoalition.org. It would be awesome if you could attend. And that's the content that I have for today, and I look forward to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Excellent presentation, and thank you, Meredith, for sharing. The challenges in recycling are just the challenges in recycling are beyond just materials. And she talked about the opportunities, and she shared that there's increased diversion and recycling opportunities, and the challenges for moving, the opportunity to remove challenging materials. And she talked about opportunities. And so even though there are challenges, that's an opportunity to find a solution. So now is an opportunity for you to interact with our speakers, and we are to the question and answer portion of today's session. As a reminder to our attendees that are online, if you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat area and we will address that accordingly. So are there any questions? Okay, I'd like to start. So Jessica, a question for you. What questions do you get over and over? So I'm sure in your line of business there are several. So for example, if someone would say, we're looking for issues where the messaging just doesn't sink in or repeat. So what would be your response to that?
Yeah, I get asked a lot, like, should I have a Twitter? Or how does Instagram work? And what I like to do with those particular people is say, you know, it's less about the platform that you're using and more about how you're talking to people and are you meeting them where they are. So I would say, well, you know, are the majority of your customers on Twitter? If so, then yeah, let's do a deep dive into that. Or are they on Instagram? Or like I was talking about earlier, maybe most of your paying customers are in fact attending conferences like this. So if you want to allocate resources to social media just because it's trendy, you know, maybe you're kind of shouting into the void with those posts, and maybe you need to be getting in front of people at conferences or using some of those non-digital platforms like radio or newspaper, things like that. So it's really coming down to knowing where your audience is to make sure that you're using your time and your budget most efficiently.
Thank you. So know your audience. Another question, let's address one to Meredith. Meredith, how do your customers decide if they want to go forward with a recycling diversion option that you present to them?
Sure, that's a good question. So basically, they take in all the factors, if the material is recyclable, and first of all, and what the costs are. So oftentimes, something might be recyclable, but there might be an exorbitant cost involved with it. So they have to really ask themselves, is this, economical for us? Does this align with our objectives? It might be that they are fine with paying a little bit more to get something recycled if it's in alignment with their sustainability objectives. And sometimes they have to consider the labor piece involved. So sometimes at their distribution centers or retail locations, if they have some sort of labor involved of their employees, that might take away from their core business. So they have to have those considerations when we present to them certain recycling options.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. I'd just like, again, to take an opportunity. If there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I will do my best to hear you, and I will repeat the question so that everyone in the audience can hear. Are there any questions online? Okay. Zoom attendees, if you do have a question, feel free to type it in the chat area, and we will address those. So we'll take one more question each. I'll give a question each to both Meredith and Jessica before we wrap up. So Meredith, let's go back to you. What are some of the most unusual items you've been asked to find recycling options for?
Oh, well, there have been a few, but most recently, in the last few months, somebody came to us with a truckload of mannequins that they wanted to recycle, so that was kind of tricky. Here lately, we also got a request for work boots, like steel-toe boots, and how to recycle used boots. So that's also a new one. And then speed bumps, like in a parking lot. A company has come to us who has a bunch of those, so they're curious about recycling options for those. So those are some of the more unusual items I've seen.
Wow. It's always interesting to hear that type of response, to see what people are bringing in to recycle. Thank you, Meredith. Jessica, what is your target demographic that you're trying to reach? How do you get in front of them?
Ooh, good question. I would say you need to put yourself in that target demographic's shoes. So for example, we're all going to leave the conference today, and some of us are going to airports. And we're going to be sitting there just kind of messing around, scrolling on our phone. And it's a great opportunity to first examine the way you interact with media. And by that, I mean, as you're going through whatever platforms you prefer to use, you're probably following some brands already. And they're probably outside of the waste and recycling industry. So it's a good example or a good opportunity for you to sit down and look at how you interact with them and the brands that you follow and take inspiration from personally. And then look and see what they're doing well, what you can adopt or use for personal inspiration. And then make sure that once you've kind of noted those opportunities, put yourself in your customer's shoes and think about how they're doing the exact same thing. And so you can craft your message using that inspiration, but realigning it to talk to the people that you want to be in front of.
Wonderful, wonderful. So last call, any questions? Okay. Jessica, for our audience today, is there one takeaway that you would hope that they would utilize and that one nugget that you hope that they gained from your talk today?
Sure. I would say don't be paralyzed by indecision. You guys are going to leave here, and there's a lot of things you could say, and there's that fear that I'm going to offend somebody. No matter what I do, there's going to be somebody who's going to take the message wrong, or you're going to not cover a particular demographic that they think they're really important and you should be talking directly to them. Say something. You're going to get better over time, and the first message that you put out starting today, if you look at it from, like, say, years from now, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that was just so ineffective. I didn't say the right thing. It wasn't finessed exactly the way I wanted it to be. That's okay. You have to start somewhere, and marketing and communication is pretty much a continuous improvement program. So the biggest thing is just get started. Say something, and it'll get better from there, I promise.
Awesome. Just get started. And Meredith, same question for you. You shared some wonderful information today. If our audience could take away one nugget, what would it be?
I would say stay committed. There's so many different material types that are out there, so maybe the lack of opportunity from yesterday, there'll be something more tomorrow. So just coming down the line, there might be more opportunities for different materials. There's a lot of innovations happening. There's new kind of operational improvements that are happening. So I would say just stay committed, keep after it, and tomorrow's a new day, so there might be new recycling opportunities.
Boy, stay committed. So just get started and stay committed. We need to put that on a shirt, I think. Well, again, I'm Heather Armstrong, Executive Director of Recycle Florida today. It has been my pleasure to be your moderator. We are having our annual conference. We're back on track in Daytona Beach Shores, September 7th through 9th. Please make plans to join us. I'd like to close the session by welcoming Mr. Gene Jones back to the platform, or either I believe he would.
I'll just make comments.
Okay, he's going to say some
Thank you,
welcoming
Heather.
words from
First
there.
off, thank our panel, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you very much. Good job, ladies. Thank you. Just a real quick closing. I'll make sure that everybody gets the proceedings from the event. Give me a couple days to put it all together. David's still got to send me all the video files and everything, so we'll compile that. So you'll get the recordings, you'll get the PDFs, and that includes everybody that's online as well. And then lastly, we're going to do this again, March 13th through the 16th. Next year, we'll be back in Destin, so hopefully we'll get a chance to see everybody again. Much larger crew is what I want. So, all right, thank you very much. Thank you for coming.